the most known piece of literature from the Vedic texts. It actually appears within a much larger work, the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is an amazing book. It's the biggest book still existing from the antique. It's some say like 100,000 four-line verses, which is altogether, it's a book that is bigger than, if you take the Bible and the Quran and the Odyssey and the Iliad together, Mahabharata is a bigger book than that. It's an enormous piece of literature, and how many actually have read the entire Mahabharata is a good question. And there's so much in there, and the whole you might say plot or theme in the Mahabharata is a fratricidal war between within one group of family of princes. Two groups of cousins are fighting over the royal power, and that's the whole theme in the Mahabharata. And in the end, the whole schism ends with an enormous war that took place 5,000 years ago, where most of the dynasty is destroyed, and the righteous and very religious princes called the Pandavas are reinstated as the rulers of the world. That's kind of the overall line in the Mahabharata. So within the Mahabharata there is Bhagavad Gita, and that takes place just before the final war takes place, and it's Krishna and Arjuna are speaking. Arjuna is one of the 5 Pandava brothers who in the end emerged victorious. And he is the leading general on the battlefields on the side of the Pandavas. And Krishna is his chariot driver. So just when the battle is about to start, Arjuna, he asked Krishna, please you drive my chariot out in the middle of the battlefield so I can see all those soldiers and generals with whom I have to fight. In those days, war was a civilized thing, undertaking. War didn't mean you drop bombs on innocent civilians. It meant soldiers, generals, warriors would go out somewhere on a battlefield, far away from where everyone else were living, and then fight against each other. Man to man, basically, equal to equal. It was based on chivalry, principles of chivalry, and everything was very fair. You were fighting against equals, sword against sword, club against club, bow against bow, chariot driver against chariot driver, elephant driver against elephant driver, like that. And the war would take place from sunrise to sunset. And after that, there was no war. You could even, soldiers could walk from one camp into the other and just sit down and talk like friends. That was the war that was there taking place. But still, it was a ferocious war. But just before the war takes place, Arjuna asks Krishna, please drive my chariot out here in the middle of the battlefield so I can see all those I have to fight against. And when Krishna brings Arjuna out there, Arjuna, he's looking over, and he actually is he's shocked what he sees, because he sees on the other side, he sees of course an enormous army, but it's not that he's afraid of an enormous army. He's the most powerful of the soldiers, and these warriors actually not afraid of fighting or dying for that matter. But he sees still on the other side is his friends are going to fight against him. Families, his grandfather is on the other side, is going to fight against him. His teacher his cousins, and actually everyone in the dynasty that he knows, they are lined up against him, or also on his side, but most are going to be killed here. And under that circumstance, Arjuna, he starts having some doubts about, is this actually, is actually correct? Is it right to fight in this battle? And he starts even shivering and just becoming very unsure of himself. And there he then starts talking with Krishna. Is this, should I fight? And actually he says, I should not fight. But then says Krishna, but then I'm completely confused. Please help me get, so we can actually, make the correct decision. Should we fight? Should we not fight? So then that is the conversation, the Bhagavad Gita. That is Krishna and Arjuna discussing whether Arjuna should fight. And of course, Krishna convinces Arjuna he should fight. It's righteous. It's wrong to withdraw. You must fight. But within that conversation, Krishna he instructs him from the very beginning, not on the, you might say, mundane platform or even moralistic platform, but immediately he uses spiritual understanding to convince Arjuna about why it is right to fight. Or actually, he gives him the knowledge by which he can decide what is right and wrong in that particular situation. And also, just as, and this is why the Bhagavad Gita has been such a popular book, because that knowledge is also as relevant for all of us to actually decide, what we are going to do in our situation. We all have a life. We all have to make decisions what we're going to do with our life. And the knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita is an amazing tool that can help one to actually decide what is the right path of action that I should take. And this is why it's such a popular book. It's India's most popular book, the most popular book from the Vedic literature. Everyone reads the Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is written in Sanskrit. I have here, I'm going to read the Sanskrit text first. This Sanskrit, of course, is the oldest known language of the world, oldest Indo-European language. And the text you're going to hear is 5,000 years old, according to the Bhagavad Gita itself. Some will contest it's that old, but according to the Mahabharata itself, it's written something like a little more than 5,000 years ago. Some of you might have heard different dates for the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know if you have even been discussing the age of the Vedas and dating of the Vedas and like that. But according to the Mahabharata itself, we are something like 3,000 before Christ. And there are reasons to actually assume it's probably the correct dates. One reason could be that why would someone write a book and give a wrong date for when it was written? Authors generally don't do that. Another reason is that there is a lot of information that actually can be corroborated in the Mahabharata, such as astronomical and planetary constellations. Actually, it's astronomy and astrology plays a big role in Vedic culture, and therefore you'll actually find in all the texts generally there is a lot of information about the constellations of the stars and planets and suns and moon and so on. And what's interesting is that until 10 or probably 20 years ago, there was no way to confirm or corroborate these dates. But with the development of very powerful software, computer technology, we actually now have software that can calculate star constellations and solar and lunar eclipses and so on, thousands and thousands of years back. And this has been done with the Mahabharata. One astronomer in the University of Memphis actually made some calculations on some of the constellations given actually just prior to the battle took place and just prior to Bhagavad Gita was spoken, there are some constellations given there. And he made calculations on those and actually found that these constellations were actually could have been seen on the night sky something like 3167 BC, which is very much, the same date as the Mahabharata gives itself for when it was written. So anyway, I mean that's a side issue. Whether it was written on this year, on that year, the knowledge is what is why everyone is fascinated by the Bhagavad Gita. But it's I'm just mentioning it because it's one of mankind's really the real great classics. It has been so for thousands and thousands of years. So I'm just picking up here. This is Sanskrit. It's in the second chapter, and it's just when Krishna starts instructing Arjuna. Arjuna has been kind of lamenting and expressing his confusion, and now Krishna immediately he starts talking to Arjuna. And the interesting thing is that he doesn't immediately talk about right and wrong as such, what you should do, but he talks about that, tells Arjuna that actually you're speaking very learned words, but you are lamenting for something that any learned man would never lament for. Those who really are wise, they never lament for neither the living nor the dead. And this is what Arjuna is sorry about. We are dying, or my family has to die, and so on, and we want to live. And Krishna says, but this is not, a really wise person does not lament for neither the living nor the dead. And then then he goes on to say that actually there's never been a time when I did not exist, or nor you, or nor all these kings around here, and neither will any of us ever cease to be in the future. He immediately, Arjuna is talking about dying and so on. Krishna says there is no death. There's nothing to worry about. You're lamenting that you have to kill men, but we cannot kill anyone. It's not possible. You cannot die. They cannot die. It's impossible to kill anyone. As far as the body is concerned, you cannot do anything to save it anyway. No matter if you want to save someone, the body can never be saved. So that's actually the theme that Krishna immediately strikes. And this is why Bhagavad Gita is such a striking book. Immediately it's a discussion on the spiritual platform, as of us as spiritual beings. And from there, discussion on, so what should one do with a spiritual understanding? So here, text 13 here, Krishna, after having declared that we are all eternal and have always existed and will always exist, then it goes like this. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tata dehantara praptiya dhiras tatra namuyati. Translation. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. And Srila Prabhupada here, he writes in his commentary, since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates into another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for the changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause of lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness, and just to insert here, the Mayavadi theory is, I mentioned to you before, the idea of monism and the idea that this difference between God and soul is a temporary difference, and at liberation we become one, God and soul. So that's what Prabhupada refers to here. It's the Mayavadi theory, and of course he's arguing against that idea. So he writes here, the Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally and are called kshara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the supersoul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities, and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then the relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy, Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless, because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity Arjuna, who is a forgotten soul deluded by Maya. I'll read the Sanskrit in translation again. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tatad antara praptiya dhiras tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So, what Krishna is saying here is kind of the basis of spiritual understanding, of spiritual realization. And it's a very simple point that he is pointing out. He is pointing out that the body is always changing, but the self within is always the same. And therefore, we must be different. We must be different from the body. We had a body as a child, our childhood body. We had or have a body as a youth. And we have another body as old people. The body is actually always changing. The cells are being replaced. It's like, we can take our hair, for example. Of course, some of us have less hair than others. But the hair is something that is constantly growing, and we cut it off and it grows and like that. So even though, we look at a picture of ourselves when, 10 years back, we may look exactly the same hair, but we know it's not the same hair. It's just being constantly replaced. And the whole body is like that. It is the body is simply matter that is being replaced, and of course it's, when we call the body is growing and so on, but that means it's changing. It's never the same. The body we had as a childhood is actually dead. It does not exist anymore. All the matter has been replaced, And when we are old people, again, the present body that we have will no longer exist. But the striking thing is that I'm still existing. I'm still me. I'm the same I that I was when I was 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old. And you ask any old person, and they look very different like that, but within they'll say, no, I'm still the same. It's still me. I'm not changed. And if one just considers this very simple fact, then one can actually realize that we must be different from the body. We are two different identities. This argument is crucial in Bhagavad Gita. It's not excluded to the Bhagavad Gita, by the way, just to mention that. It's a classical philosophical argument, and Socrates actually uses the same argument on his last day, when Socrates is just before he is executed. He has a conversation with some of his friends, where also they're discussing whether is a life after death or not. And Socrates is using the same argument that is found in the Bhagavad Gita. Again, the body is always changing, but the self is unchanging. They must be different. And there is nothing to be afraid of. Therefore also we saw that Socrates had no fear of death at all. He was laughing and joking, up to the last moment when they died. They asked him, Socrates, what do you want us to do with you? Do you want to be buried, or do you want to be burned? And Socrates said, you catch me first. Try to catch me. As far as the body, you do what you like. I don't care. You cannot catch me. Because it's, the self is not the body. That was his argument, and here Bhagavad Gita is there. And that's actually, over the next 20 verses, Krishna will get more into detail and explaining why it must be like that. We are simply not this body. We must be different. We are conscious selves who are, individual persons, and we are simply sitting in the body, which is like a, passing. We could just go through different material phases that we're passing through, simply observing within the same unchangeable conscious I. And that is the basis for the whole philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. This very observable fact. One often has the idea that spirituality or religion is a matter of faith and doctrine like that. So some is, because all kinds of knowledge is based on doctrine and faith. We cannot function without faith. Everyone has faith. Anytime you take a step, you walk on the street, on the sidewalk, every step you take is a matter of faith. You don't know if the next tile on the street it looks like a regular street tile, but it might be a trap. Someone, aliens or whatever has made a trap, and the next time you step on it, the whole thing flips over and you disappear into a big hole, and you are transported to some different galaxy or something like that. You don't know. It's absolute faith that you put in your foot like that. But the point is, and if you have no faith, how could you ever take a step? You must have faith to do anything. When you took this step, and actually you realize, no, it's solid, then you have realization, and then you can say with certainty, this tile is solid. There's no more faith. But to get the realization, you must first have the faith that you take this step. That's why, Kierkegaard, he talks about the leap of faith in order to, and you have to, you cannot function without taking leaps of faith at every second, actually every millisecond. Our whole existence is based on faith, and you cannot get any knowledge without faith, and also you cannot have faith without knowledge. Because why do we have so much confidence when we put our foot on the sidewalk on each tile, because we have experienced previously that sidewalks are very safe places to walk. So we have a faith based on previous experience, and they very much interlock faith and knowledge. It's not that's a dichotomy that we have here in the West: faith one side and science, knowledge on the other side. But it's an artificial thing if you really analyze it. They're interlocked. So that religion has elements of faith doesn't make it special, doesn't disqualify it or qualify anything like that. It's just part of human existence to have faith, but also have realization. And here we see the whole teaching of Bhagavad Gita is based on this solid observation that the self is unchangeable and the body is always changing. Therefore, we must be different. From there, one can deduce so much spiritual understanding. One can understand that there must be life after death. One can understand there's nothing to be afraid of, like Krishna says here. So a person is not bewildered at the point of death, because it's just going from one stage to another. There's nothing to be, afraid of or so excited about. But also one can understand a lot about reality. One can actually realize the existence of God, that God must exist, which is quite simple, because if I'm an eternal self-conscious being and I'm not matter, because that must be reason. I'm not matter. That means reality ultimately must be non-material. I'm a little part of the great whole. What is nature of the whole? Well, the quality that I find in myself must be also in the entire, in the whole, in the complete whole. I don't know if that's clear, but for example, if you take a sample, you take a glass of seawater. You may not have access to the sea, but you have a glass of seawater, and then you can analyze that, and you'll find that, well, this water is salty, it contains salt. Then you can conclude the ocean has salt, because how could a glass of seawater be salty if the ocean was not salty? So it's, the quality found in the part must be found in the whole. So if we can analyze ourselves and find that actually we are eternal conscious selves, then that quality must be in the complete whole, in the origin of everything. So simple logic. There must be a conscious self, behind everything which we are emanating from. God must exist. You can realize God simply by this very, very simple fact. And of course, logic and has a limit, but you can definitely by simply this kind of logic come to the point to understand that I am an eternal person. God must be existing. He must be an eternal person, because if I'm a person, he must have personality too. It's actually pretty simple, straightforward logic. And probably, and this is what Krishna is, starting his whole instruction to Arjuna with, this simple logic, and then he builds on from there. Prabhupada, he here in his purport, takes it a couple of steps further. He even starts talking about why souls are here, because that would also be an obvious question. If we are eternal souls, eternal selves, and we are we're not these bodies, we simply in the samsara, caught in a cycle of birth and death, in temporary bodies, going from one life to another, from one birth to another, one existence to another, again and again and again. Then who are we? What are we doing here? Where do we come from? Because this is actually a foreign nature. We are in a foreign element. Who are we and why are we here?